The morning fog slowly dissipated over the quiet streets of Reading, revealing a small California town where life flowed steadily and predictably. At 247 Maple Street, the Miller family began another day, just as they had done for many years. Bruce Miller stood at the kitchen window, holding a mug of hot coffee. At 42, he looked like a typical small-town resident, strong, with the calloused hands of a mechanic and the tired eyes of a man who earns an honest living. His graying hair was cut short, and his face showed the calm satisfaction of a man who knew his place in the world. "Breakfast is ready," said Susan, his wife, placing a plate of eggs and bacon on the table. At 39, she was still an attractive woman, although the years of married life had left their mark. Her chestnut hair was neatly styled, her makeup flawless even at such an early hour. Susan always took care of herself. It was one of the qualities Bruce appreciated in her. "Thanks, honey," he said, sitting down at the table where their 16-year-old daughter Sarah was already eating breakfast. The girl was a carbon copy of her mother in her youth. Same dark hair, same expressive eyes. She was now intently leafing through a history textbook, preparing for a test. "Dad, can you give me a lift to school? Mom has to go to work early today," Sarah asked without looking up from her book. "Sure, sweetie. I'm going to open the garage early anyway." Susan glanced at her watch. "I really need to hurry. Dr. Henderson scheduled a meeting for 8. She had been working as an administrator at a local clinic for 12 years and was known for her punctuality and professionalism. Bruce watched his wife quickly gather her things. In recent months, he had noticed that she had become more fussy, more distracted. Perhaps it was just fatigue. Working in a medical facility was never easy, and there had been a lot of colds going around town lately. "See you tonight." Susan kissed her husband on the cheek and waved to her daughter. "Sarah, don't forget your math homework." "I won't forget, Mom." After Susan left, the house fell into its usual morning silence. Bruce finished his breakfast and looked at his daughter, who was still immersed in her textbook. "Ready?" he asked. 5 more minutes. Bruce smiled. Sarah was a diligent student, just like her mother had been. He and Susan had met in high school, where their daughter now attended. Back then, Susan was the prettiest girl in the class, and he was just a regular guy who was more interested in cars than school. Somehow he managed to ask her to prom, and 4 years later, they were married. 18 years of marriage. Good, stable years. Of course, there had been difficulties. The birth of Sarah, financial problems in the early years when he was just starting his business. But they had always managed together. Susan was the perfect wife. She ran the house, raised their daughter, and supported him through difficult times. "Okay, let's go," Sarah said, closing her textbook and picking up her backpack. The drive to school took only 10 minutes. Reading was a small town where everything was within walking distance. Bruce loved this place. He was born here, and this was where he had spent his entire life. He knew almost every resident, and every resident knew him. His auto repair shop, Miller Motors, had a good reputation, and customers had been trusting him with their cars for many years. After dropping his daughter off at school, Bruce drove to his garage. The building was located on the outskirts of town, near the main road. It wasn't the prettiest place, but it was practical. It was convenient for customers to get to, and the rent was affordable. Opening the garage door, Bruce turned on the radio and got to work. First, he had to finish repairing Mr. Johnson's pickup truck. The transmission problems were more serious than he had initially thought. Around 10 in the morning, Tommy Reeves, his only assistant, walked into the garage. The young man was 23 years old, the son of a local farmer, but he was more interested in cars than farming. "Hi, Bruce. How's Johnson's pickup coming along?" "Almost done. You take care of Mrs. Wilson's sedan. She's complaining about strange noises when she brakes." They worked in silence, occasionally exchanging professional comments. Bruce loved this atmosphere of concentration, when he could immerse himself in his work and think of nothing else. During his lunch break, he decided to stop by his house. He had forgotten to bring the lunch Susan had made for him. The house was empty, which was normal at that time of day. Sarah was at school and Susan was at work. Taking his lunch out of the refrigerator, Bruce noticed Susan's phone on the kitchen table. Strange. She never forgot her cell phone, but anything could happen. He was about to leave when the phone vibrated. A notification appeared on the screen indicating a new message. Bruce had no intention of reading someone else's correspondence, but he saw the sender's name, Deborah. He didn't remember Susan mentioning anyone with that name. Suppressing his curiosity, he left the phone where it was and returned to the garage. The rest of the day passed as usual. Customers came and went, cars were repaired, and life went on as usual. At 6 in the evening, Bruce closed the garage and drove home. At home, he was greeted by the smell of dinner and the sound of the TV from the living room. Susan was in the kitchen, cooking chicken with vegetables. Sarah was doing her homework at the kitchen table. "How was your day?" his wife asked without turning around. "Fine. Fixed Johnson's pickup truck, a few other odd jobs." Bruce washed his hands and sat down at the table. "By the way, you forgot your phone at home." "Yes, I noticed it at work. It's a good thing it wasn't a busy day." Over dinner, they discussed the usual family matters. Sarah talked about school, and Susan complained about her new doctor, who couldn't seem to get the hang of the electronic patient record system. Everything was as usual, and yet Bruce felt something intangible, as if his wife was somewhere far away, even though she was sitting right next to him. After dinner, Susan went to take a bath, and Bruce stayed in the kitchen helping Sarah with her math. He wasn't very good at algebra, but he tried his best. "Dad, have you ever regretted leaving Reading?" his daughter asked unexpectedly. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. I'm just curious. Some of my classmates dream of going to universities in big cities. Have you ever wanted to try living somewhere else?" Bruce thought for a moment. "You know, Sarah, I think happiness doesn't depend on where you live. It's important who you're with and what you do. I have a family, a job I like, friends. What more could I want?" The girl nodded, but he saw doubt in her eyes. Perhaps she was already thinking about her future, about whether she would stay in Reading or choose a different path. Late in the evening, when Sarah went to bed, Bruce and Susan sat in the living room watching the news. His wife seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone. "Is everything okay?" Bruce asked. "Yes, of course. I'm just tired. It was a hard day." But when Susan thought he wasn't looking, Bruce noticed her quickly typing some messages and then deleting them. It was strange, but he decided not to think too much of it. At 11 o'clock, they went to bed. Susan fell asleep quickly, but Bruce lay awake for a long time, thinking about the day that had passed. Everything was as usual, and yet something had changed. He couldn't figure out what it was, but he felt it intuitively. Outside, the wind rustled in the treetops, and a car drove by in the distance. Reading fell asleep, preparing for a new day that, as it seemed to Bruce, would be as calm and predictable as all the ones before. Deborah Carter first saw Reading on an early September morning when her old Honda drove into town in the drizzling rain. Moving here from San Francisco seemed like a step backward in her career, but after her divorce, she needed to start her life over, far away from her memories and her ex-husband. At 35, Deborah was an attractive woman with short red hair and intelligent green eyes. She got a job teaching English at a local high school, not the most prestigious position, but enough to rent a small apartment on Oak Street and start a new chapter in her life. The first few weeks in Reading were spent trying to settle in. Deborah studied the school curriculum, got to know her colleagues, and furnished her new home. The town was quiet and provincial, the complete opposite of bustling San Francisco, but that was exactly what she was looking for. One October day, while Deborah was shopping at the local supermarket, she bumped into a woman at the frozen food section. The woman was about her age, with neatly styled brown hair and a friendly smile. "Excuse me," said the stranger, moving her cart aside. "I haven't seen you before. Are you new in town?" "Yes, I just moved here. I work at the school. Deborah Carter," she said, extending her hand. "Susan Miller. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Reading." The woman shook her hand firmly. "What school do you work at?" "Reading High School. I teach English." "How wonderful. My daughter Sarah is in 10th grade. She might be in your class." They talked for a few more minutes, discussing the town, the school, and local customs. Susan turned out to be a pleasant conversationalist, open, friendly, and ready to offer advice. She told Deborah about the best places in town, recommended where to shop for groceries, and suggested a doctor to see if needed. "By the way, I work at the clinic as an administrator," Susan added. If you need medical assistance, please let me know. I can help you make an appointment with the right specialist. Thank you. That's very kind of you. You're welcome. Maybe we could get a coffee sometime. I can tell you more about the city and you can tell me about yourself. What do you think? Deborah gratefully accepted. She didn't have any friends in the new city yet, and Susan seemed like the kind of person who would be easy to get along with. They met a few days later at a small cafe called Main Street. Deborah arrived first and took a table by the window. Susan showed up right on time, wearing an elegant dress and a light cardigan. Even for a casual meeting, she looked impeccable. "Sorry I'm late," Susan said, even though she wasn't. "I was held up at work." "No problem, I just got here." They ordered coffee and pastries. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. Susan talked about her family, her husband, a mechanic, and her high school-aged daughter, and how they had lived in Reading for many years. Deborah shared her plans, talked about her job at the school, and how hard it was to start over in a new place. "What brought you to Reading?" Susan asked. "Usually people leave small towns. They don't move to them." Deborah hesitated for a moment. "Divorce," she finally said. "Sometimes you just need a change of scenery, "I understand. That must be difficult." There was genuine sympathy in Susan's voice, and Deborah felt she could trust this woman. They talked for almost 2 hours, and when it was time to leave, they both regretted it. "It was very nice," Susan said. "Let's meet again." "I'd love to." Since then, their meetings have become regular. Once a week, sometimes more often, they meet at a cafe, go shopping, or walk in the park. Deborah has learned a lot about life in Reading, and Susan seems to enjoy the company of her new friend. Gradually, their relationship grew closer. Susan began to share things that she had obviously never told anyone before. She talked about her dreams, how she had imagined her life when she was younger, and how reality had turned out differently. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life," she confessed one day as they sat on a bench in the park. "Do you know what I mean?" "Of course I do," Deborah replied. "After my divorce, I realized that I had spent 10 years trying to be someone I'm not." Susan looked at her intently. "Who are you really?" The question hung in the air between them. Deborah sensed that Susan was waiting for an honest answer, but she wasn't sure she was ready to be that candid. "I'm still trying to figure that out," she said finally. November in Reading was rainy. Deborah had settled in at the school. Her students were getting used to her, and she was getting used to them. Among her students was Sarah Miller, a smart, thoughtful girl who was very much like her mother. One day after class, Sarah stayed behind to discuss her homework. "Miss Carter, my mom said you're friends with her," the girl said, gathering her things. "Yes, your mom is a very nice person. She helped me settle in the city." "She's changed since she met you," Sarah said unexpectedly. Deborah was taken aback. "In what way?" "I don't know. She's happier, I guess. She smiles more. She always seemed so proper before. Now she acts like a girl sometimes." Deborah didn't know what to say. She had noticed the changes in Susan herself. The woman had indeed become more lively, more open. But her daughter's words made her wonder what kind of influence she was having on the Miller family. That evening, Susan sent her a message. "I want to see you. Can we meet?" They met in the park, despite the drizzling rain. Susan looked agitated, almost feverish. "I've been thinking about what you said about being yourself," she began without preamble. "And I realized that I don't know who I am. I was a daughter, then a wife, then a mother. But who am I on my own?" "Susan, no, let me say it. I'm 39 years old, and I've never asked myself that question. And then you came along, and suddenly I started thinking that there are other ways to live, other ways to be happy." Deborah sensed that the situation was becoming increasingly complicated. She could see that Susan was in a state of inner turmoil and understood that her appearance had been the catalyst for this crisis. "How do you feel about me?" Susan asked bluntly. The question came so unexpectedly that Deborah was taken aback. She had long realized that their relationship had crossed the boundaries of ordinary friendship. Every meeting with Susan brought her joy. She thought about her constantly and waited for her messages. But she also understood that Susan had a family, a husband, and a daughter. Susan, you have a family. I know, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking how you feel. Deborah looked at this woman, beautiful, intelligent, desperately seeking answers to questions she had asked herself for the first time, and she realized that she could no longer lie to her or to herself. I think I'm in love with you, she said quietly. Susan closed her eyes, as if those words caused her pain and relief at the same time. Me too, she whispered, and I don't know what to do about it. They sat in silence under the drizzling rain, each lost in her own thoughts. Deborah knew that this conversation had changed everything. They could no longer pretend that their relationship was just friendship. I need some time to think, Susan finally said. Of course. They parted that evening without making another date. Deborah walked home in the rain, feeling a mixture of happiness and anxiety. She had finally confessed her feelings, but she knew that difficult times lay ahead. The next few days passed without communication. Deborah didn't write to Susan, afraid of seeming pushy. Susan was silent too. At school, Deborah saw Sarah and wondered every time what the girl thought of her mother, if she suspected anything. Finally, on Friday evening, a message arrived. Can we meet tomorrow? I have something to tell you. They met at the same cafe where they had met a month ago. Susan looked determined, but her eyes betrayed her anxiety. I've been thinking a lot, she began. About myself, about my life, about how I feel. And I've realized that I can't pretend anymore. What do you mean? I mean that I want to be with you. I don't know how it's possible. I don't know what will happen to my family, but I know that I can't give up these feelings. Deborah reached across the table and took Susan's hand in hers. Her skin was warm and soft. What about your husband, Sarah? Bruce is a good man. He doesn't deserve what I'm doing, but I can't live pretending to be someone else anymore. And Sarah, I hope she'll understand someday. In December, their relationship became more intimate. They saw each other more often and spent more time together. Susan learned to lie to her husband, making up excuses about working late, meeting friends, and urgent business. Deborah felt guilty knowing she was destroying someone's family, but she couldn't stop. Susan blossomed in their relationship. She became more confident, more alive. Even her appearance changed. She began experimenting with clothes, changed her hairstyle, and bought new makeup. I finally feel like myself, she told Deborah as they lay together in the apartment on Oak Street. For the first time in my life, I feel real. Deborah stroked her hair and tried not to think about the fact that this moment of happiness was built on lies and deception. She knew it couldn't last forever, that sooner or later the truth would come out. But right now, in these stolen moments of intimacy, she was happy. Meanwhile, Bruce Miller began to notice changes in his wife's behavior. She became more distracted, often stayed late at work, and constantly checked her phone. Sometimes he caught her smiling for no apparent reason, as if she were thinking about something pleasant. At first, he attributed it to fatigue or stress at work, but gradually, suspicions began to creep in. Susan became more critical of his appearance and criticized habits that she had previously taken for granted. Maybe you should buy a new shirt, she said one evening. That one is really worn out. I like this shirt, Bruce replied. It's comfortable. That's the problem. You don't care how you look. Conversations like this became more frequent. Susan criticized his dress sense, his habit of watching sports, even the smell he brought home from working in the garage. Bruce didn't understand what was happening. 18 years of marriage, and suddenly his wife only saw his flaws. He began to wonder if she was seeing someone else. The idea of infidelity seemed absurd to him. Susan was a model wife and mother. She had never given him any reason to suspect her, but something had definitely changed, and he couldn't figure out what. One evening, when Susan was late at work again, Bruce decided to stop by the clinic to give her a ride home. It was a spontaneous idea. He wanted to do something nice for his wife, to show her he cared. But at the clinic, he was told that Susan had left 2 hours ago. Bruce sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, trying to figure out what this meant. Where had his wife been for the past 2 hours? Why had she lied to him? For the first time in 18 years of marriage, he began to seriously suspect that his wife was cheating on him. He began to notice details he hadn't noticed before. Susan had become overly protective of her phone, never leaving it unattended. When it rang, she would walk into another room. In the evenings, she was often distracted, as if she were thinking about something important. "Bruce, is everything okay?" asked Tommy, his assistant, noticing that his boss had been staring at one spot for 10 minutes, holding a wrench in his hands. "Yes, everything's fine," Bruce shook himself. "Just thinking." But nothing was fine. Every day he felt his familiar world slowly crumbling. The wife he had trusted unconditionally for 18 years had become a mystery to him. That evening, when Bruce returned home, Susan announced that she would be staying late at work tomorrow to do a medication inventory. "Will that take long?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I think until 9 or so." "Should I pick you up?" "No, you don't have to. Stay with Sarah and help her with her algebra." After dinner, when Susan went to take a shower, Bruce noticed that she had left her phone on the kitchen table. His heart began to beat faster. He knew he shouldn't do it, but his suspicions were stronger than his principles. He picked up the phone. The screen was locked with a password. Bruce tried Sarah's birthday. No luck. Their wedding date. Also no luck. Then he entered Susan's birthday. The phone unlocked. In the messages, he saw numerous messages from Deb. His hands trembled as he opened the conversation. "I miss you. See you tomorrow," was the last message from Deborah. "Me too. I can't wait to see you," was Susan's reply. Bruce scrolled up the conversation. What he saw made his world turn upside down. "You looked so beautiful sleeping this morning. I didn't want to wake you. I dreamed we were together on the beach. I want it to be real. I never thought I could feel this way about a woman. You've changed my whole life. I finally know who I really am." Bruce read message after message, feeling something cold and painful growing inside him. His wife wasn't just cheating on him, she was dating a woman. 18 years of marriage, a daughter, shared plans, dreams. It was all a lie. He heard Susan coming out of the bathroom and quickly put the phone down. When she returned to the kitchen, he was sitting at the table reading the newspaper, but the words were blurring before his eyes. "Are you sick?" Susan asked, noticing how pale he looked. "You don't look well." "I must have caught a cold," he muttered. Bruce didn't sleep that night. He lay next to his wife, who was sleeping peacefully, trying to figure out what to do next. Anger fought with pain, distrust with the love he still felt for her despite everything. By morning he had made up his mind. He had to see for himself. The next day, Bruce asked Tommy if he could leave early, saying he wasn't feeling well. In the evening, when Susan left for her supposed inventory, he got in his car and followed her. He didn't know where to look for her, but his intuition told him to head for a residential area. On Oak Street, he saw his wife's familiar car parked outside a small apartment building. Bruce parked nearby and waited. Half an hour later, 2 women came out of the building. He recognized one of them immediately. It was his wife. The other woman was unfamiliar to him, red-haired, attractive, about the same age as Susan. They stood at the entrance, talking quietly. Then the stranger hugged Susan and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss on the cheek, but a real, passionate kiss, like lovers kiss. Bruce gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. All his suspicions were confirmed in the most painful way. He watched his wife, the mother of his child, kiss another woman on the street, completely unashamed. They talked for a few more minutes, then Susan got into her car and drove home. Bruce waited until she was out of sight, then headed home himself. At home, he sat down in an armchair in the living room and waited. Susan returned around 9 as promised. "How are you?" she asked as she entered the house. "Feeling better?" "Yes," he replied curtly. "How's the inventory?" "Tiring, but we've written everything down. Now we can forget about it until next year." She spoke so naturally, so convincingly that Bruce almost believed her. Almost. But he had seen her with that woman. "Susan?" he called as she headed for the stairs. "Yes?" "We need to talk." Something in his tone made her wary. "About what?" "Sit down, please." Susan slowly sank into the chair opposite him. Bruce could see her tense as if preparing for a blow. "Who is Deborah?" he asked bluntly. Susan's face paled. What do you mean? Don't pretend. I know about your relationship. A heavy silence hung in the air. Susan looked at her husband, and he could see fear, guilt, and something else. Relief? Struggling in her eyes. Finally, the truth came out. How did you find out? She asked quietly. Does it matter? What matters is that you lied to me. 18 years, Susan. 18 years. Bruce, I can explain. Explain what? That my wife is seeing a woman? That all our years together have been a lie? Susan covered her face with her hands. It's not like that. Not everything was a lie. Then what? What part of our life was true? She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. Sarah, our daughter is true. My love for her is true. What about me? The question hung in the air. Susan couldn't answer, and that was answer enough. I tried to be a good husband, Bruce said, his voice shaking. I worked. I provided for the family. I loved you. I loved our daughter. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. The problem is me. In you? Or in the fact that you prefer women? Susan flinched at the cruelty in his voice. Bruce, I didn't plan for this to happen. I met Deborah and suddenly I realized what? That I never knew who I really was. That I've been playing a role my whole life, the role that was expected of me. Bruce stood up and began pacing the room. A role? Is being a wife and mother a role? For me, yes. I married you because it was the right thing to do. I had a child because that's what was expected of me. But I never felt like myself. And now you do? With this Deborah? Yes, whispered Susan. For the first time in my life, I feel like myself. Bruce stopped and looked at his wife. Do you love her? Susan didn't answer, but her silence spoke louder than any words. Did you ever love me? I thought I did. I wanted to love you. You're a good man, Bruce. You deserve better. Better? Better than a wife who lied to me for 18 years? At that moment, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Sarah was coming down, probably to get a glass of water. Hearing her parents' voices, she stopped. Mom? Dad? Is everything okay? She asked, appearing in the living room doorway. Bruce and Susan fell silent. Their daughter looked at them anxiously, sensing the tension in the air. We're just talking, dear, Susan said, trying to sound calm. Go to bed. Are you fighting? No, just discussing some things, Bruce lied. Everything's fine. Sarah looked uncertainly at her parents, then nodded and went back up to her room. When her footsteps faded, Bruce turned back to his wife. What now? He asked. I don't know. Are you going to leave your family for her? Susan was silent for a long time. I can't live a lie anymore, Bruce. It's destroying me. What about Sarah? Does she have to suffer because of your discoveries? Sarah will understand. When she grows up, she'll understand that it's better to be honest with yourself. Understand? Understand that her mother abandoned her family for a woman? Can you imagine what it will be like for her at school when everyone finds out? For the first time, Susan was at a loss. She had thought about her feelings, about her right to be happy, but she hadn't considered how it would affect her daughter. Everyone knows everyone in Reading, Bruce continued. In a week, the whole town will be talking about our family. Sarah will be the subject of gossip and rumors. Maybe we should move. We? There is no we anymore, Susan. There is you, there is me, there is our daughter, but we are no longer a family. Susan began to cry. I'm sorry, Bruce. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. And not just me. He sat back down in his chair, feeling terribly tired. How long has this been going on? Since October. 3 months. You lied to me every day for 3 months. I tried to stop, but I couldn't. And I thought the problem was me. That I was a bad husband. That you were bored with me. They sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Bruce stood up. I need time to think, he said. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Bruce. No, I can't talk to you right now. I need time. He headed for the stairs, then stopped. One more thing. Until we decide what to do next, I don't want you to see her. You can't forbid me. I can. As long as we live under the same roof, as long as we're officially husband and wife, I can. And I forbid it. Susan wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. Bruce went up to the guest room and lay down on the narrow bed. Through the wall, he could hear his wife crying, but his heart no longer responded to her tears. The next few days passed in painful silence. They spoke only about necessary things and avoided being alone together. Sarah noticed the change in the atmosphere at home, but her parents pretended that everything was fine. Bruce couldn't concentrate on his work. He kept thinking about what to do next. Divorce seemed inevitable, but he was afraid of how it would affect Sarah. Meanwhile, Susan was going through her own drama. She missed Deborah, but she knew that seeing her would only make things worse. Every day at home was a struggle. One evening, while Sarah was doing her homework in her room, Bruce tried again to talk to his wife. "I've made up my mind," he said. "We're getting a divorce." Susan nodded. She had expected this. "I'm keeping the house. Sarah is staying with me." "Bruce, no, she's my daughter. She's our daughter. But I won't let you ruin her life with your experiments." "They're not experiments. They're who I am." "Then be yourself, but without our daughter." Susan realized that her husband was determined. The custody battle would be painful for everyone, especially Sarah. "I want to see her." "We'll see. First, you have to decide what's more important to you, your relationship with this woman or your relationship with your daughter." "Why do I have to choose?" "Because in Reading, you can't have both. People here won't understand. And I won't let Sarah suffer because of other people's ignorance." The conversation ended in another argument. Susan went to her room, and Bruce remained in the living room, feeling that his world had finally collapsed. 2 weeks had passed since their last conversation about divorce. 2 weeks of painful silence, cold stares, and pretending in front of Sarah. Bruce hardly slept, mechanically doing his work in the garage and returning every evening to a house that no longer felt like home. Susan complied with his request not to see Deborah, but Bruce could see how it was destroying her. She lost weight, became distracted, and often cried when she thought no one was looking. Sometimes he caught her gaze and saw such longing in her eyes that his heart ached with pain. But pity fought with anger, and anger usually won. On Friday evening, Susan announced that she was going to visit her sister in a neighboring town the next day. They needed to discuss the sale of their late mother's house. "How long will you be gone?" Bruce asked, without looking up from the newspaper. "I'll be back for dinner, maybe a little later." Sarah looked up from her textbooks. "Mom, can I go with you? I haven't seen Aunt Linda in a long time." "No, dear, it's boring grown-up stuff. You'd better stay with your dad." Bruce detected a note of anxiety in his wife's voice. Something was wrong. Saturday began with rain. Susan left early in the morning, saying she wanted to avoid traffic. Bruce spent the day with Sarah. They watched a movie, played board games, and cooked dinner together. The girl was happy to spend time with her father, but he could see that she was feeling the tension in the family. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" she asked suddenly during dinner. Bruce almost choked. "Why would you think that?" "You don't talk anymore. You sleep in the guest room. Mom is sad all the time." He looked at his daughter, a smart, perceptive girl who deserved honesty. But how could he explain the truth to her? "We're having some problems," he said cautiously, "but we're trying to work them out." "Is it because of me?" "No, sweetheart. Not at all because of you. You're the best thing in our lives." Sarah nodded, but he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. At 8 o'clock, Susan still hadn't returned. Bruce tried to call her sister, but she said Susan hadn't been there. A cold feeling gripped his heart. He had trusted his wife again, and she had betrayed him once more. "Sarah, I'm going out for a few minutes," he said to his daughter. "If Mom comes back, tell her I'll be home soon." He got in his car and drove to Oak Street. Susan's car wasn't at Deborah's house, but that didn't mean anything. She could have parked somewhere else. Bruce stopped across the street and waited. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof of the car. Half an hour later, Susan came out of the building. She looked happy, peaceful, the way he hadn't seen her in months. Deborah appeared behind her. They stood in the rain, oblivious to it, talking about something, laughing. Then Deborah took Susan's face in her hands and kissed her. The kiss lasted forever. Bruce watched as his wife responded to another woman's kiss with a passion she had never shown him. Even in the early years of their marriage, there had never been such intimacy between them. Something inside him broke completely. The women parted ways. Deborah returned to the house, and Susan walked to her car, which was indeed parked in the neighboring alley. Bruce drove home, overtaking his wife on a parallel street. He had to get home before her. At home, he sent Sarah to a friend's house for the night. The girls had been planning it for several days. "Are you sure everything's okay, Dad?" Sarah asked as she gathered her things. "Of course. Have fun." When his daughter left, Bruce sat down in the living room and waited. His mind was strangely empty, as if all emotion had suddenly disappeared, leaving only cold clarity. Susan returned at 9:30. "Hi," she said as she entered the house. "Sorry I'm late. Linda and I got caught up talking." She lied so naturally that Bruce was almost impressed by her acting talent. "How's Linda?" he asked calmly. "Fine. She's decided to sell her mother's house through an agency. She doesn't want to deal with it herself." "I see." Susan went into the kitchen and poured herself some water. Bruce followed her. "Where's Sarah?" "At Jessica's. She's spending the night there." "Okay, I need to take a shower." She headed for the stairs, but he called after her. "Susan." "Yes? How long are you going to lie to me?" She froze on the first step. "What are you talking about?" "I called Linda. You didn't go to her house." There was a moment of silence. Susan slowly turned to him. "Bruce, you were at her place, at Deborah's." There was no point in denying it anymore. Susan lowered her head. "Yes, I told you not to see her. You have no right to tell me what to do." "I do. I'm your husband. Not by my own free will." Those words hit harder than a slap. Bruce felt a wave of rage rising inside him. 18 years. 18 years not by your own free will? I didn't want to hurt you. But you do. Every day, every minute. He raised his voice. "You destroyed our family for her. Don't you dare insult her." "Insult her? I don't even know what to call what you're doing." Susan straightened up. "We love each other. It's more than we ever had." "Love? You call that love?" "Yes. For the first time in my life, I know what true love is." Bruce looked at his wife, the woman he had lived with for almost 20 years, had a child with, and made plans for the future. And he realized that he didn't know her at all. What was between us? Habit, convenience, what was expected of us. And Sarah? Was our daughter also a convenience? Sarah is different. I love her, but not me. "No," whispered Susan. "I'm sorry, but no." Something broke inside Bruce. All the pain, all the anger, all the humiliation of the last few months boiled over into a burning hatred. So all these years were a lie? Not all of them, but many of them were. You used me. I tried to be a good wife. You were a liar. 18 years of lies. I lied to myself as much as I lied to you. And now you're going to leave me for her? Abandon your daughter for your perversions? Susan turned pale. It's not perversions, and I won't abandon Sarah. You already have, the moment you chose her over your family. I chose honesty over lies. Honesty? Bruce laughed bitterly. You lied to me for months. Because I was afraid of your reaction. And you were right to be afraid. They shouted at each other, venting months of pent-up pain and anger. Bruce took a step closer to his wife. You think you have the right to destroy everything for your whims? It's not a whim, it's who I am. Then who are you? Who are you, Susan? I'm a woman who finally realized that she loves women. Those words hit him like a slap in the face. Bruce looked at his wife, and there was so much hatred in his eyes that she backed away. So it's me? He said slowly. Am I such a bad man that I made you fall in love with women? No, it's not you. Then what is it? What's wrong with me? Nothing. You're a good man, but you're a man. The phrase hung in the air between them. Bruce felt the last remnants of his self-respect crumble to dust. I see, he said quietly. He turned and walked to the kitchen drawer where the knives were kept. Susan didn't immediately understand what was happening. "Bruce, what are you doing?" He took a large kitchen knife and turned to her, solving a problem. "Bruce, don't," she said, fear creeping into her voice. "You ruined my life," he said, slowly approaching her. "Our family, our daughter's future. We can talk about it." "Talk? With you? You can't tell me the truth." Susan backed away toward the wall. "Bruce, please." 18 years, Susan. 18 years I've been a fool." He raised the knife. Susan screamed, but no one was home. The neighbors were far away, and the rain drowned out the sound. The first blow was to her chest. Susan fell, clutching the wound, blood flowing from it. She looked at her husband with horror and incomprehension. "Why?" she croaked. "Because you killed me first," Bruce replied, and struck again, and again, and again. When it was over, Bruce stood over his wife's body, breathing heavily. The knife fell from his hands. The kitchen was flooded with blood. He sank into a chair and sat there for a long time, staring at what he had done. The shock gradually wore off, and reality began to sink in. He had killed his wife, the mother of his daughter. Bruce got up and went to the bathroom to wash his hands and face. His reflection in the mirror looked calm, almost peaceful. Then he returned to the kitchen and began to clean up. He knew what to do. He had watched crime shows for years. First, he wrapped the body in an old blanket from the garage. Then he washed the blood off the floor, walls, and all surfaces. He used the bleach Susan used to clean the bathroom. He put the body in the trunk of his car. Tomorrow, he would take it to the woods and bury it where no one would find it. He burned the clothes in the fireplace. He threw the knife into the river on his way home. By morning, there was no trace of the crime in the house. Bruce took a shower, changed his clothes, and went to bed. For the first time in many months, he slept soundly and peacefully. When Sarah returned on Sunday morning, her father told her that her mother had gone to Aunt Linda's and would be staying there for a few days. "They've decided to sell the house together," he explained. "It'll take some time." Sarah nodded and went to her room. Bruce watched her go and thought about how they would now have a normal family. Just him and his daughter. No lies, no betrayal, no Susan. Monday began as usual. Bruce took Sarah to school and drove to the garage. Tommy asked how Susan was doing. Everyone in town knew everyone, and her absence couldn't go unnoticed. "She's helping her sister sell their mother's house," Bruce replied calmly. "It'll take a few days. Say hi to her when she gets back." "I will." Work proceeded as usual. Bruce repaired cars, talked to customers, and joked with Tommy. No one noticed any change in him. He was even surprised at how easy it was to pretend. On Tuesday, questions began to be asked at the clinic where Susan worked. Dr. Henderson called Bruce. "Susan hasn't been to work in 2 days. She's not answering her phone. Is everything okay?" "Yes, she's at her sister's, helping with family matters. She was supposed to call work, but I guess she forgot in the rush." "That's strange. That's not like her." "I know, but they're going through a difficult situation with an inheritance." Dr. Henderson didn't look convinced, but he accepted the explanation. On Wednesday, Deborah Carter arrived at the Reading police station. Detective Michael Stone was an experienced investigator. At 45, he had seen a lot, and his instincts told him when something was wrong. The young woman sitting across from him was clearly upset. "Tell me again, Miss Carter," he said, taking notes. "Susan was supposed to call me. We agreed to meet on Tuesday, but she didn't show up. Her phone isn't answering. What is your relationship with Mrs. Miller?" Deborah hesitated. "We're friends." Stone noticed her confusion. "Close friends?" "Yes." "Did you speak to her husband?" "No. We don't know each other very well." The detective wrote this down. "When was the last time you saw Mrs. Miller?" "Saturday evening. She came to my house." "What time did she leave?" "Around 9. "Did she say where she was going?" "Home. She always went home." Stone studied the woman's face. She wasn't telling him everything. "Miss Carter, if you want us to find your friend, you have to be completely honest with me." Deborah took a deep breath. "We're more than friends. We're in a romantic relationship." "I see. Did her husband know about this?" "Yes. He found out recently. They had been arguing about it. Now the picture was becoming clearer. Stone had seen cases like this before. Did Mr. Miller threaten his wife? I don't know. Susan didn't go into details, but she was very upset. Okay, we'll look into it. After Deborah left, Stone called Bruce Miller. Mr. Miller, this is Detective Stone from the Reading Police Department. Can we meet with you? It's about your wife. Is something wrong? Bruce's voice sounded alarmed. We should talk in person. Can I come over? Sure. I'm in the garage on Industrial Road. Stone arrived half an hour later. Bruce greeted him in his work overalls, wiping his hands with a rag. Detective, what's going on? Your wife hasn't been at work for 3 days. Her friend is worried. Where is she now? At her sister's in Medford, helping her sell the house. Can you give me her sister's number? Bruce gave him the number. What's going on? Why is the police interested? Just checking. When should she be back? She said by the weekend, maybe earlier. Have you spoken to her? Yesterday, briefly. She said things were taking longer than expected. Stone wrote down every word. Mr. Miller, does your wife have a friend named Deborah Carter? Bruce's face betrayed nothing. Yes, she's a teacher. They met recently. Close friends? I don't know. My wife doesn't talk much about her friends. Any problems at home? No, everything's fine. Stone studied Bruce. The man looked calm, even a little surprised. Nothing suspicious. All right, if your wife contacts you, ask her to call me. He handed him his business card. After the detective left, Bruce stood there for a while, staring at the card. It was beginning, but he was ready. Meanwhile, Stone called Susan's sister. Linda was surprised. Susan? No, she hasn't been here. We haven't spoken in a month. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. What happened? She's missing. Her husband said she's with you. He's mistaken or lying. Stone hung up and frowned. Bruce Miller had lied to him. That changed things. That evening, the detective returned to Bruce's home. Mr. Miller, I need to talk to you. Bruce invited him inside. Sarah was doing her homework upstairs. I spoke to your wife's sister. She says Susan didn't come to her house. Bruce looked puzzled. That's strange. She said she was going to Linda's. When exactly did she leave? On Saturday morning. She said she'd be back for dinner, but she didn't come back. She called in the evening and said she was staying out. Have you spoken to her since then? Yes, on Sunday and Monday. Can you show me your phone? Your call log? Sure. Bruce took out his phone. The call log did indeed show calls to Susan's number on Sunday and Monday. Where's her phone? She has it, of course. That's strange. Miss Carter says her phone isn't answering. Maybe it's dead, or she's out of range. Stone nodded, but something bothered him. Mr. Miller, how long have you known about your wife's relationship with Miss Carter? Bruce froze. What relationship? A romantic relationship. A long pause. I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Carter says they're having an intimate relationship, and that you know about it. Bruce slowly sat down in the chair. That's true. Tell me about it. I found out in January. I accidentally read her messages. We were arguing, but I never threatened her. How did you feel when you found out about the affair? Pain, anger, but I wouldn't hurt her. Where were you on Saturday night? At home with my daughter. We were watching a movie. Stone took notes. Can I talk to your daughter? Why? To confirm what you're saying. Bruce hesitated, then called Sarah. The girl came down, looking curiously at the stranger. Sarah, this is Detective Stone. He's looking for your mom. What's wrong with Mom? The girl asked, alarmed. Nothing serious. We just want to make sure she's okay. Do you remember what you and your dad were doing on Saturday night? I was at a friend's house. I slept over at Jessica's. Stone looked at Bruce. But you said you were home with your daughter. I was mistaken. I mixed up the days. I was home alone on Saturday. Until what time? All evening. I didn't go anywhere. Sarah frowned. Dad, why is Mom taking so long at Aunt Linda's? She doesn't usually stay out late. Things are taking longer than expected, sweetheart. Stone noticed the concern in the girl's voice. Sarah, when was the last time you spoke to your mother? Friday morning before school. She hasn't called you since then? No. That was strange. A loving mother wouldn't go so long without contacting her daughter. After talking to Sarah, Stone asked to look around the house. "Do you have a warrant?" Bruce asked. "No, but if you have nothing to hide." "Of course. Look around." Stone walked through the house. Everything looked normal. Too normal. In a house where a woman who had been missing for 4 days lived, there should have been signs of her presence. But everything was spotlessly clean. In the kitchen, the detective smelled a faint odor of bleach. "Have you cleaned recently?" "Sarah helped on Sunday. We cleaned the whole house." "I see." On Thursday, Stone received the results of the phone records check. Susan's phone was last detected by cell towers on Saturday at 9:47 p.m. near her home. After that, nothing. But Bruce's call log showed outgoing calls to her number on Sunday and Monday. The technical service confirmed that these calls had not gone through. The phone had been turned off. Bruce had lied about talking to his wife. On Friday morning, Stone arrived at the garage with an arrest warrant. "Bruce Miller, you are under arrest on suspicion of murdering your wife, Susan Miller." Bruce did not resist. He silently held out his hands for the handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." Tommy watched with his mouth open. Customers gathered around, unable to believe their eyes. At the station, Bruce was silent at first. But when Stone showed him the results of the phone records, he realized the game was up. "Okay," he said quietly. "I killed her." "Where's the body?" "In the woods, outside of town. I'll show you where." "Why did you do it?" Bruce was silent for a long time. "She destroyed our family. 18 years of marriage, and it turned out to be a lie. Because of her relationship with a woman?" "Not just that. Because she never loved me. I was just a convenience to her." "That's no reason to kill her. It was to me." The body was found where Bruce had indicated. Susan Miller was buried in a shallow grave 20 miles from the city. The news of Bruce's arrest shook Reading. No one could believe that the quiet, unassuming mechanic was capable of such a thing. Sarah was sent to live with her Aunt Linda. The girl was in shock. In 1 week, she had lost both her mother and her father. Deborah Carter blamed herself. If she and Susan had been more careful, if they hadn't met that Saturday at the trial, Bruce pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his final statement, he said, "I don't justify what I did, but 18 years of lies broke me. I lost everything, my wife, my daughter, myself. Susan wanted to be free. Now she is free." Detective Stone was present at the sentencing. He had seen many murders, but this case hit him particularly hard. An ordinary family, ordinary people, and such a tragedy. In a maximum security prison, Bruce Miller sat in a solitary cell and thought about how he now had his whole life to figure out what he had done.